Oh, I guess I can. That music intro was wonderful. It was very nice. Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well and is healthy. We'll wait a couple more minutes to, make sure people are all in. There is another webinar at 2 o'clock, so we will need to be finished by then. So we'll just wait a couple more minutes. But if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to ask, you can wait to the end when I'll answer any questions, or if there's something that you'd like to know now, and if it relates, I can try and answer it as we're going through some of the slides. Okay, so we'll start in a couple minutes. All right, so why don't we go ahead and start. So first off, it's nice to see you and talk to you this way for now. I hope everyone is healthy and doing well and surviving this whole thing. What today I'm going to talk about, for those who don't know me, my name's Ariane O'Donnell. I am an attorney doing real estate closings, and I have an office in Keller Williams across from the conference room. So anytime you have any questions, feel free to pop by, or right now email me, and I'll be happy to answer what I can. So today I'm going to talk about closing during quarantine, what's happening and how it's going on. So if you have any questions, and while I'm going through, feel free to pop them into the chat, or if you want to ask, whatever the case may be, or we can wait till the very end. So we'll start talking. Okay. So the first slide, I started preparing this a while back in the middle of March. So some of these things is whether has been answered. You know now that you are considered essential, because what the governor has done is said all businesses need to be closed except for essential businesses, and realtors are in that category, as well as attorneys. So that allows us to be able to still do these closings and to get things still moving. Hopefully that's all been going well for you. I know that there's been some restrictions and definitely protocols about how to do your walkthroughs and your initial showings and all of that. So this is been in the process for you guys a little bit. So hopefully it's getting a little easier. So the coronavirus actually has a paragraph now that we've been adding to contracts that have been coming in. It is something that you should add to all the binders. You can even add just subject to, coronavirus status or something to that effect, to add that to a binder for a purchase on behalf of your buyer. So that way it is covered. And then what we attorneys are doing is providing this language that we are putting into the closing contract, so that when it's signed by the party, it's incorporated in there. And so what it is that is saying that either party can delay a closing as a result of the coronavirus under several different conditions. One is the town clerk in any of the town or towns in which the property is located is not accepting documents for recordation in any manner. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, so I'll skip that for now. As well as the land records of any of the town or towns, in which the property is located are not searchable either in person or by internet search. So those I'll cover in a moment. Or the buyer or buyer's counsel has been informed that the mortgage lenders is unable to provide the mortgage funding required for the closing of the purchase, or one of the parties has been diagnosed with the coronavirus. So and they're unable to perform their obligations. So when that happens, then either party can execute that aspect of the contract. And what it means is that you would give written election within 2 business days after the occurrence of the permitted reason, and in the notice shall set forth the reason for the election. So unless the parties agree to a different date, so if there was no date agreed to by the parties in terms of when to extend and postpone the closing, then it would be either that it won't be extended beyond the expiration of the buyer's mortgage commitment, or if it was extended by the lender at no additional cost to the buyer, as well as or X amount of days from the last agreed upon closing date. So the best interest is just to have the parties work out a new closing date and decide when that would occur. But if it's silent on that, if there was no agreement, or maybe there's trouble agreeing, then it would be that those 2 provisions would apply. So at that point, a new date would be created for the closing. Now, does this mean you can cancel the transaction because of coronavirus? And the answer is no. Depending also where you are. So I guess I should clarify that the answer is actually perhaps depending on what process you're in. So if you're close to closing and now something happens, then it is not going to be a cancelable transaction. But, and this has occurred with some clients, that if they're still in the mortgage process and now they've been laid off because of the coronavirus, and it really seems to be more the layoff, any people who are furloughed, some banks are still allowing that to not be a problem, but it's actually lost their job, then you would withdraw under the mortgage contingency. So that's where, if that happens, you can get out of it. What happens if you lose your job after your mortgage contingency expires? Your client loses their job after the mortgage contingency expires and now can't get their loan. It's not, I haven't heard of what happens with that yet. It is not a definable thing. Hopefully the seller would work out something with the buyer on that, but there's no exact answer on that yet. We don't know what could necessarily happen. Legally, that's the buyer's problem. But with the circumstances being the way they are, and the fact that this has never before been dealt with, there should be some leniency, and courts may not, look favorably on sellers who are really being difficult about a situation. So it's going to be more at that point a negotiation, working out things like that.
Hey, Ariane.
Yes.
Just as a quick tag on to what you were saying, it's the broker's voice booming from above. I just wanted to be clear that what we're asking agents in the market centers to do with regards to the addendum that you were speaking of is to have their clients seek the advice of their attorney prior to signing anything that says addendum for this situation. We're not asking them to put them on, but they can discuss them, that they exist, but that we're asking that be driven solely by their attorneys, because it is contractual language, and we don't want to step into that arena. So just to clarify our role in that, we're asking our agents to go and have their clients speak to their attorneys about that on either side.
And that's great. So it makes it easier that way. And thank you for letting me know what you've advised them. So it's absolutely fine if it's not even on the binder or noted anywhere, or you didn't even do anything. We're still going to do it anyway, because that's what we feel is necessary to protect our clients in this, unprecedented time. So it's just letting you know what we will be adding on and the aspect related to it. So now getting to the closing, we got the offer, everything's all set. I had started preparing this back at mid-March, as I mentioned. So this is inaccurate at the bottom, but it was to show you how turbulent it was initially. Town halls were shutting down, weren't doing anything, or was by appointment only, wasn't open to the public. So it was really a turbulent time. It was a lot of town by town decisions that was going on. Now all town halls are open, not necessarily to the public. Some still require appointments. Some won't even let the public in at all. And Bridgeport was the last holdout. There was actually no communication from Bridgeport for quite a while, until just yesterday, when finally they've confirmed that they are now open and will take recordings and will do, will be available, and that they updated their online indices so that people can check and see things now. So all the town halls are now open and available to do as much as you possibly can. The title companies, which is really the important thing, is how are the title companies handling it? The title companies issue an owner's policy and a lender's policy for title problems on all transactions. Lenders is required in every transaction that has a bank lending money, and an owner's policy is optional for an owner to get, which would be the difference between the lender's price and lender's mortgage amount and the owner purchase price. So the title companies were still insuring the transactions back in that mid-March area. That was kind of rocky time. And so they were still doing that insurance of it. So that was helpful for the banks, because the banks will still get the insurance policy that they require. Now, the title companies had a little bit of trouble. If the indices were not online, then they can't issue a commitment, which is a title search, and therefore we really would have a problem at that point. But most of them seem to be able to pull information together to do some title searches, and the title search is really important to have, to be able to see what the current status of the title is in case there's any problem, that the seller has a judgment lien or anything to that effect. So as long as they're able to issue a commitment, they'll allow us to go ahead and close, even if the town hall was closed. After that point, they allowed us to close regardless, and we would have to hold the deed and the mortgage until it reopened. that was during that time period. Now we can overnight the documents, or we can make an appointment to go in, whatever the case may be. So online access is available with most towns, but some towns don't have it. Darien, for instance, is not online at all. So you have to go in, and they allow appointments to go into the town clerk's office to do any searches. Part of our title search that we normally order is a municipal search. And a municipal search will go to the building department, the zoning department, the environmental department, everywhere, to check and see that there aren't any violations on the property. This is a problem now. So this is something that we are not able to get presently. We used to never get municipal permits. It was never an actual thing that was ordered every single time. It was only in the last several years that it became a problem because the towns were enforcing outstanding open permits. So when the town had an open permit, they would go to they wouldn't issue any other permit or certificate of occupancy until all permits were closed. And some towns were charging a fee for it. For instance, Stamford originally was doing like $1,000 to close a permit. Now it's down to $200. But it then becomes the buyer's problem if that's not addressed ahead of time. So we started to order municipal permits in order to make sure that everything was closed, or if there was tons of work done and nothing was showing on the building permit as being done, that was a problem also. Because there is a statute that allows any permit that's older than 9 months 9 years, to be closed automatically. So now, before we used to have to close like 30-year-old permits. It was very annoying. But now anything that's 9 years old or older, it's deemed closed and we don't have to worry about it. But anything under 9 years, we do have to deal with it. And what we would do is tell the seller, you got to close that permit and go through all of that. So now we have a problem. We cannot get these searches anymore. Some things are online. Stamford, for instance, does have their permit information if you sign up for an account, and then you can check and search their building permit database. But because of this problem, now we're back to the old days where we don't have these municipal searches. So what I've had to do now is explain to the client the possibility. We've talked about, does it look like they've done some work on the house? Is there a possibility? And that, and then of course we have it as a provision in the contract as well, but obviously that's only representation by the seller. And usually the seller representation is limited to their time of their ownership. So if there was a permit that was taken out by the previous owner, this current seller doesn't have to attest to that or explain it or let you know about that or anything. So it's become a little bit of a problem in that, we have that issue. Now there is the title policy. There are 2 different levels, and there's the level called an Eagle policy. That's a little bit more expensive. It's 10% more expensive, but it gives much more coverage. And so there is a provision in there that helps cover forced removal due to an open permit, forced removal by a building department due to an open permit. So that if the buyer purchases this higher level title insurance policy, that will at least help in this process as much as it possibly can. And then but that's only if the town or the city does something about that open building permit. That doesn't deal with the fact that when they go to sell the home, they have to possibly take care of it. So if someone owned the house for 2 years and 2 years prior, the previous seller did something and has an open permit, your buyer buys the property, owns it for 1 year and goes to sell it, but we're still under the 9-year time period. Any open permit could come back to be have to be dealt with the buyer, your buyer who's now a seller. Now they have to take care of it. So what we've had to do is, unfortunately, explain the situation and get a waiver from the client of liability that they understand, and we've explained that it's just not possible to get, to know that information. We can do as much due diligence as possible. It may not necessarily cover everything, but they, with that understanding, they hereby waive it. And if someone refuses to waive it, then you can't close, because it's just information that we need, and we have to wait until the town halls are open again fully to get that. All right. So now we got through the hurdles, and so how do we close? So with the need for social distancing, there have been a lot of things put into place in terms of closings. And one is this mechanism called remote ink signed notarization. RIN is the catchy name. So this is something that if your clients ask, or maybe something to tell your clients, like, hey, there is a way to do contactless closings so that we can still facilitate these things. Before, it was required that attorneys are equivalent to a notary in Connecticut, so we are the exact same thing. And it is required that anyone taking an oath has to do it in person. The governor has put in an executive order that on June 23rd, on May 23rd, March 23rd, sorry, that makes it good until June 23rd, that the executive order allows for remote ink notarization. And I'll explain what that is in a moment as well. Some banks are resisting it. Some banks aren't understanding what it is because they're confusing it with something called RON, which is a remote online notarization. And the remote online notarization is when you're through a secure type portal are taking electronic signatures from the buyers and going through, and they're electronically signing everything only. So there was a lot of resistance in the very beginning, mid-March to actually just a little while ago, a lot of trouble. And some banks are still trying to understand the concept. So that is something that if you're working with a lender, you may want to ask them, are you allowing these remote ink, notarizations? The Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have finally just recently given formally acceptance of these procedures, as long as performed by executive order and following the different rules that we have to do, which I'll talk about next. So they are now saying it's okay. And that was the biggest thing. That's why the banks were resisting it, because they wanted to make sure that the loans would be sold, would be bought by a secondary market. And if there's any problem with any of the bank papers, a secondary market lender could say, no, thank you, I'm not going to buy it. And then the original lender is stuck with it. So that's why there was a lot of resistance. So, hopefully your bank now that you're working with understands it a little bit better and knows it's not the electronic signing at all, because the way we do it now is we have a package that we print out and I overnight to the client, or that we overnight basically. The client gets it, and we set up a time to do a online closing. Witnesses have been eliminated, which is great. Obviously needed for social distancing. That was one of the initial problems with the executive order, that it still required a witness, so it kind of defeated the purpose, but Governor Lamont did fix that in a subsequent order. So that has been eliminated. So we don't need a witness as we normally do. So the client gets the papers. We do an online closing. I have to go through each paper with the client. We talk about it. I have them sign it in front of me, hold it up. They have to show their physical ID. They have to show, the signing before and after to show a sign. And during the transaction, I have to record the oath part of the document. So when and there's a new clause that's provided that the buyer has to be in the state of Connecticut. So I cannot do this type of transaction if the buyer is stuck in Florida buying a Connecticut property. I cannot do it. Did not get corrected. The title companies have fought for that to try and get that done based on the possibility that someone could be stuck. But that was not the case. So if your client is not in the state, this is not going to work. So then we have to capture the oath of the person acknowledging that they are in the state, that they are doing this via virtual signing, that they are signing it in the presence of each other, all of that. And I have to keep that for 10 years, that little clip of the oath. So not all attorneys have this capability. I do. Part of my phone system has this virtual meeting possibility and recording aspect. So I do have that capability. So the attorneys that don't have the capability are still requiring like a curbside closing, where basically the people drive up and sign all the papers in their car and hand them over and things like that. So if your client is extremely nervous about being face-to-face with anyone, that's something to consider. And then after that, the originally signed package gets returned back to me, and then I sign the parts that I need to sign and finalize the closing from there. And so your client would also be wiring money. We wouldn't be taking bank checks, because we're also doing virtual closings with the seller's attorney as well, getting the documents from the seller's attorney and then taking care of the closing that way. All right, and so it's been a little bit of a fun time in that aspect of trying to figure out these closings. But does anyone have any questions or anything about how anything that's happening related to that? I'm assuming I'd see it in the chat. Well, hopefully you're getting your closings done and having that all getting finalized.
I'm sorry. Hey there, it's Jacqueline. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I have a quick question. I actually have a couple of deals that are stuck in limbo because of, one is for permits, and they're working through that. I understand that they're open, but it's even slower going than it normally is, which is incredible. But
well, and also some towns aren't allowing, when you can go in by permits doesn't mean that you're allowed to go to the building department. Maybe whatever town you're working in is allowed.
Yeah, it's in Stamford actually. So it's just, it's very slow. But
yeah.
The other one was in probate, and they started the probate, but we haven't got a decision. And is that right that they're closed right now in Stamford? Is also?
Yes. What I understand is like non-essential business for probate courts and also for the superior courts is closed. But probate matters. I mean, it might be a town-to-town decision, but I do know that probate courts are operating on a very limited basis. I have a client right now who, in fact, a closing that's happening tomorrow, where it's an estate selling it and they need the releases and they're getting them done. So some towns are doing stuff.
It's not Stamford by any chance, is it?
It isn't. It's Norwalk. But check in. You never know. They may be operating on a slower basis, but this can be something that I don't believe that they've been shut down completely. It's just saying that they're not going to process every little thing under the sun and act normally. But this is something that is, real estate related and essential in order to be
Mhm.
able to complete the closing. So,
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're at the, at the finish line. We just
yeah.
need to get this, that's it. We just need to get it approved. And, she says she's having issues. And I heard from the attorney that they're actually closed until next month, but
Oh
I don't know.
boy.
All right. Well, oh
Yeah,
well.
if they're closed, yeah, I don't think then there's much that you can do. And it's probably not an easy number to determine. Sometimes the title company will allow an escrow to be held for a certain amount of money in order to make sure everything's all set. But if it really was just at the beginning of the process, then there's a certain tax form that's needed in order to do it.
Right.
So, it has to be done. And if that wasn't done yet, then that's going to delay things.
Okay. Thank you.
Then someone's saying they have a probate deal closing tomorrow in Darien, but the lawyer had to request everything by email, or somehow I think they waived the hearing. Didn't your chart say by appointment? So that was only by town, for town clerk's offices, that chart. So all the other departments are operating on their own, either not allowing anything or closed or whatever. So that was only for town clerks. So, but at least it's closing, so that's good. So Darien's open. And hopefully Stanford will maybe open up quicker so you can get your deal done.
I hope so.
Hey, Ariane, this is Stephen.
Hi.
My question for you is, do you have a sheet or paperwork that would sort of recap what you just said about out-of-state buyers?
In terms of showing it to someone, it's part of the executive order that it has to be, that the person has to be in state. I mean, I can certainly, see if there's something that says it more definitively. That's been what I've been doing a lot of title company webinars. So that's what they have been noting, that it's specific to only in state. So I can see if I could find something to send you.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, great.
So is there like a timeline on all this? So it's the same as the, in our real estate world, as to all this closing you're doing, COVID
Yeah.
closing?
Yeah, hi Debbie. It was a little bumpy in the beginning, but my closings weren't closing at that time. So I was still able to get to this point. So now I have a whole bunch of closings this week and next week. So those have all been proceeding on schedule. The banks, some of these banks have been really great, and the commitments have been coming through and clear to closes. I haven't seen a delay in that aspect. So according to the timelines that were already in place before this quarantine happened, yes, we are closing on time. And some are even earlier than when we were supposed to close. So it is happening. And they are going. And it's mainly, the main thing is that the buyers are still in good shape. These buyers who lost their jobs, we had a deal that got lost because someone lost his job, and we still had the mortgage contingency, so they had to back out under that. So have you all, like, anyone feeling that things are delayed a little bit for circumstances like a not as straightforward closing? So the probate matters that you're talking about, that's gonna obviously put a hitch on it. I have the closing that I have tomorrow even had a judgment lien on it, and the seller was able to negotiate with the creditor on that one to get a release of judgment lien. So things are happening. They're just in a funky way.
I think a lot of my buyers, I mean, one pulled out on the deal, you know, it wasn't big inspection issue, you know, they're just not sure how to proceed. So,
Mm,
you know, I know we could have worked worked out the issues, but I
yeah.
just feel it's such a good reason for just buyers to back out at this point.
Yes, and I did think that was going to be a lot more of a worry, and I almost find it's either the buyers are like, yes, still going, you know, this is it, boom, 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 and then there are the buyers who are just nervous as can be. There seems to be no
Yeah.
middle ground. It's one or the other. Like there's no issue and they're moving and trucking along, and there's other people where it's an issue.
When they talk to someone else, they just it's who they talk to.
Right. You should put it like a gag order on it or something. You can't talk to anyone. Don't talk yourself out of this deal.
I know. It's a good deal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, well, thank you so much. That was really helpful, you know, just to know everything on, you know, all the different aspect of the closing.
yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. It's good to, you know, maybe give your client a heads up, especially like if they happen to be extremely nervous and not wanting to be around people or anything like that. Then I think it can help a lot to explain, hey, there is this option of doing this very, you know, kind of virtual closing, and that you don't have to be, you know, around a lot of different people. So
Right.
it may help them to kind of ease that almost every step, because I think what the steps you have to do as well is kind of a lot of social distancing as well and everything. So yeah, so at least it's to really just demonstrate closings can still happen and we're still getting them done. Just have a little bit of a new way of doing them, which, you know, it certainly saves on my cleaning bills and, you know, hair bills and all of that. But, you know, my dry cleaning and all that, certainly saving money in that aspect. But
All of us, gas and everything.
yes, I know, exactly. My gosh, it's like crazy.
And it's so cheap now, you know.
Yes, crazy times. That's right. Well, feel free to email me if you have any other questions or if there's something specific in your transaction, you know, that maybe I can help with. And then we can always talk about it more. But this is just to let you know that we are getting closings done, that they can be done. I had a lot of different ones already happen, and the first one was a little wild, you know, to try it out, but it was a refi, so it was a little bit easier to refinance to deal with. But you know, the purchases are all going off. I've done seller documents already that way, so they're happening. So let's get those deals moving and get these people some houses, and hopefully May 20th will be the end of that part, but if not, we will still get these things closed. So, all right. So I hope everyone remains safe and healthy, and feel free to email me any questions. All right. So,
Thanks so much.
thank you, and have a good
Thank you.
day. Nice to
you.
see you. All right. Okay. I'll just wait and make sure. Oh, hi, Steve. How you doing?